In this video, we're going to talk about how to design labs in physics. Really, when we do labs in physics, all we're really doing is kind of a structured way to ask and answer a question. Okay, so we follow some steps, there's some terminology, but in the end it's really that simple. We're just trying to figure out how one thing will affect some other thing. And I think what we're going to do is talk about sort of a specific example and then use that to illustrate the process, and then we'll come back and define some terms. So let's say that you want to know what kind of things would affect how somebody does on a physics test. You want to come up with some strategies people can use to do well on physics tests. So you decide to do a lab, and you want to know what kind of things will affect a student's grade on a test. Well, if you made a list, you'd probably say how much they study. That's going to affect how they do, how much homework they do. Will probably have an effect on test grade, what they eat for breakfast, how much sleep they get the night before the test, what color shirt they wear the day of the test. Maybe that has an effect. So you can come up with this long list of things, all of which might have an effect on a student's grade on a test. Now there's kind of a difference between these and this. And the difference is that everything up here you can have direct control over. You can choose how much somebody studies and how much homework they do and how much they eat or what they eat and how much sleep they get and what color shirt they wear. So these are up to you. The grade depends on, or might depend on, those things up there in that list. So when we talk about designing labs, we talk about the fact that there's some things you can decide their values and there's some things that depend on values that you've chosen. So if we were going to do a lab and we wanted to know how to help somebody do as well as possible, we want to know how to help people get the best grade possible, we could say, well, let's let some people study some and other people do some homework and other people eat a big breakfast and other people sleep certain amounts, and then we'll have them come in and take a test and we'll see how they do. And some people are going to do well in that test and some people are not going to do well in that test, but in the end we're not really going to be able to tell what affected the grade on the test because we changed so many things. So when we do a physics lab, when we do any kind of lab in science, we need to pick just one of these things up at the top. We want to choose one of these to change and see how that one thing affects their grade. So let's say that we decided we're going to see how doing homework will affect your grade on a physics test. What that means is we can set up a lab. Maybe we pick, say, 10 students, and we have them each do a different amount of homework. So some of them are going to do a lot of homework, some are going to do no homework, and everywhere in between. Then they come in the next day, and they all take the same test, and we check to see what their grade is on that test. And now, some of them are going to do better, maybe. Some of them are going to do worse, and we can look for some kind of relationship between their grade and how much homework they did. But while we're doing that experiment, everything else in this list has to stay the same. All the students should spend the same amount of time studying the night before. All the students should eat the same thing for breakfast. All the students should get the same amount of sleep. All of the students should take the same test, because all of those things could also affect their grade, but we don't want them to. We want the only thing to change is the amount of homework they've done, and see if that changes, if that has an effect on the test. So that's really it. It's pretty straightforward. In terms of terminology, everything in this box up here at the top, these are all considered to be independent variables. And an independent variable is one that you have complete control over its value. You're independent. You're free to choose what each of these variables will be, what the value of each of these variables will be. The dependent variable is the one that you can't have direct control over. So you can't make somebody have a certain grade on the test. You can tell them to study a lot, and that might improve their grade, but what you've had them change is something up here, and that's affected their grade. So you can't go in and decide what grade somebody's going to get on a test. That depends on some of the other things, some of those other variables. All right, so let's summarize a few things here. In a science lab, the independent variable is the one you choose the values directly. So you decide how much sleep they're going to get, how much they're going to eat, how much homework they do, that kind of stuff directly. There we go. All right. The dependent variable is the thing that might depend it's hard to write on this computer. The thing that might depend on the independent variable. I'm just going to put IV for independent variable, right? And I say might depend because you don't know. Maybe the amount of homework you do has no effect on your grade on a test. I don't think that's true, but you're doing the experiment because you want to see how does your test grade depend on the amount of homework that you do. And finally, there are things that have to be held constant. These are all the other possible independent variables things like the amount of sleep you get, what color shirt you wear, all those other things, all the other possible independent variables that you're not going to let change. Because if they did, they might also affect the dependent variable, and you don't want that. You want only the independent variable to have an effect on the dependent variable. So that's it. If you want some extra practice, go ahead and check out some of the practice worksheets, and I hope this helped.